You're seeing this box. Can you tell me the sizes of this box by seeing it in video or just by holding it in your hands? This is iPad, so you may have some assumption, but can you hold a box in your hand and tell me how tell me the sizes of the box accurately? That's not possible, right? Can you hold a cup in your hand and tell me how much water this can hold? Now, can you tell me the weight of this object? At this point, you might be thinking, what kind of stupid questions these are? We obviously need a scale, a balance to determine the weight of this object or the sizes of a box. As simple as it may sound, we cannot function in society peacefully and amicably without units, measurements, scale, and balance. For us to come, that is the only way, the criteria is the only way for us to come to an objective and disputable conclusions. Even the most experienced engineer can only assume the sizes of a room without his measuring tape. He would need measuring tape to give us accurate measurements of a room. He cannot give accurate measurements using his 50, 60 years of experience. There is always some assumption involved in that, and assumptions are subjective. Even you wouldn't believe a person if he assumed the sizes or weights of a person, if of an object. If I say this weighs 20 grams, you would dispute it, and there's a good chance you would dispute it, because what feels to me may not be the same to you. Throughout the history, we made marvelous achievements, and we invented, tested, refined, and standardized certain practices that help us survive, unite, and dominate the planet. In this process, we developed criteria for every material and non-material objects like time, space, justice system, and we standardize these criteria, and we use these tools as a guidance for our day-to-day life, to live in society peacefully, to communicate, to trade, and keep improving, keep progressing in society. This logical, rational, and mathematical thinking pattern help us make unthinkable achievements in material world. Without units, measurements, balance, without criteria, we would be blinded. If you think about it, we lived in scientifically dark ages for a very long time until we developed this thinking, mathematical thinking pattern, until we developed logical thinking pattern, until we started applying logic, rationality to material objects and to events that happen around us. We did not see much of a scientific growth, much of a technological growth, but we have seen significant achievements that we made in last 2 centuries, then centuries of prior to that, centuries of our existence. This is amazing. That is only because the thinking pattern, this logical, rational, and scientific thinking pattern. However, if we divide our life into two parts, material world and the other one is mental, moral, or spiritual world, there is imbalance. We always equated scientific technological growth with better civilization, meaning the more the growth technologically, the better we are mentally, morally, and scientifically. So we are more civilized than our ancestors who lived in dark ages. That is a standard assumption created throughout in media, and that's what we learn in our education as well. However, if we observe carefully, there is imbalance. There is a steady declining in mental health. The loneliness, depression, stress, and suicide rate is more than ever in the history. Similarly, the crime, the mass murders, the crime, oppression, wars, brutality is seen steady growth in recent years. And there is so much irrational, illogical practices that is happening in the name of spirituality as well. So we equated technological and scientific growth with mental, moral and spiritual growth. But that's not the case. We see the polarity here. There is skyrocketing growth scientifically and technologically, but at the same time, there is steady decline in mental and spiritual health. Why is this? It is because we do not apply same logical, rational, and mathematical thinking pattern to the spiritual realm of our life as well, to moral realm of our life as well. We kind of blinded because, again, if we think about the criteria, if I ask you how much this cup holds, how much water this cup holds, we cannot tell. We can only assume. Same thing is happening to spiritual, moral, and mental health part of our life as well. Specifically, when it comes to spirituality, there is so much assumption. There are many religious leaders who assume they are speaking the truth. There is no standard criteria to determine what if they are speaking the truth or not. That's why there are so many divisions in society. One group follows certain leader, other group follows certain leader, one group follows one religion, other group follows other religion. There is no standard criteria, and we all following assumptions. Think about it this way. There is a milkman who is selling milk based on the assumption of the volume of the milk. There are few problems with that. Number one, he cannot supply milk to everyone accurately, objectively, the same amount of milk. So there is injustice that is happening. That's number one. Number two, he only assuming that because the assumption is very subjective, so what I feel may not feel the same to other person. So there is dispute. That is exactly what happening in the spiritual world as well. I say my religion or my way of living, my religious point of view is right and your point of view is wrong. There is dispute. There is no objective and disputable conclusion we can come to when it comes to the spiritual world. Same with moral world, moral choices as well. My moral compass is different than your moral compass. That's because just like a milkman selling milk based on the assumption, all these religious leaders and so-called moral leaders also selling spirituality based on the assumptions. So these disputes are imminent. That is what happening in society. What we need is a standard measurement, standard criteria to come to conclusion on the spirituality as well. That is, in my opinion, there are two ways we can do that. One is studying the source of the spirituality, source of the religion, the traditional text, studying it logically and applying logic, rationality, and scientific thinking pattern to the original text, because original text is a criteria for every religious group, also a criteria for spirituality. That's where all the spiritual theories are taken from, and some of the selfish leaders, selfish priests, they add their own theories and they just sell spirituality based on the assumptions. So what we do, we must go to the source of the text. That way we can have one guiding tool, a guiding book to come to some conclusion. Hey, look at this. This is what this text says. Now let's apply logic and rationality to this text. That is second. It's very important. We cannot follow the text. We cannot follow religion. We cannot follow anyone says anything blindly. We must always apply logic, rationality, scientific and mathematical thinking patterns to the text as well. That's when we can come to conclusion. We can create this platform, an objective and disputable criteria on the religious, moral part of our life as well. That way, just as we saw growth Technologically, when we started looking the world in a scientific, mathematical, and logical perspective, we'll also see the growth in spiritual world as well, as soon as we begin to apply the same principles to spiritual world as well. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.